I am officially live. A little shaky start, but I'm about to interview my friend Keith Bishop, who is the author of Prevail Over Cancer, at least the website. He's got great information on social media, and he's a former podcast guest of mine, and I'm really excited to chat with him. And I am just going to make sure we are good, and he is going to arrive. But meanwhile, feel free to write a note in the comments and let me know if you have any questions. And happy Monday, everybody. So some of the favorite things that I love about Keith is that he is just so practical. And one of the big tips that he gave me when we did our podcast is to not drink tea so hot. I love super hot beverages. I live in Washington, and so I want to drink as many hot beverages in the winter as I possibly can. And he really talked me out of that. One of the reasons is because when you drink super hot beverages, it can really burn the tissue in the esophagus. And so what happens is it sets you up to potentially have something called esophageal cancer, which is the last thing I want to do, because I also used to have GERD, which can also weaken the esophagus. So not good. So he really cured me of that. So now what I do is when I am drinking hot tea, I pour it in, I leave the lid off, and then I just wait for it to bring the temperature down a little bit. And then I feel like it's a safer option. So there you go. Okay, I will continue to answer questions if anybody would like to ask or set it up. Shoot it to me on Instagram. And we are rolling. So let's see, some other tips I'll give you that I've really learned from Keith is he talks a lot about the palm rule. So making sure that maybe questionable items that we shouldn't be eating a lot of, which is, not great carbohydrates. And by that, what I mean is, bagels and white flour products and different things like that. We do want to be really careful of those items. And so he talks about the palm rule. So making sure that you're not eating too much of the bad stuff. Okay, somebody is asking me a question, and I'm just going to check to make sure that Keith is not in the waiting room, and I don't see him yet. So somebody asked me, what do I see as the reasons for me getting breast cancer? Great question, because honestly, I should have never gotten breast cancer. And you know what? Here's the thing is I really feel like I was around an incredible amount of toxins. And I think that that is really a dangerous thing. According to one of my podcast guests, Dr. Tom O'Brien, who is kind of like the gluten-free guy, he's amazing. He was talking about that we're in contact with over 700,000 different toxins every day. And I don't know that our body is equipped to be able to do things like that. How does it continue to process all of those toxins out? I just don't know how that could possibly happen. So I think that I was around a lot of toxins, especially growing up on a farm. We used a lot of Roundup. And so that was really challenging. And so I think that was one. But then I think another one for me was unforgiveness. And I've talked about this before, but we all have people and events and even ourselves that we need to forgive in our lives. And I don't think I was very good at it. And I used to be really good at holding grudges. And you know what? That is a horrible way to live. Not forgiving people is really hard on your body, and it's really hard on your mind. And I think about it like this: when you don't forgive somebody, you are putting them in jail. And then I get to be the warden, and I get to walk around and make sure that all these people still stay in their jail cells. And so that means that I'm always on. And that is really, really scary. So um, I think that negativity has to go somewhere. And, for me, it possibly could have turned into cancer or so many other things that, inflammation and lack of sleep and all that really can contribute to cancer. So thank you, Jennifer, for that question about how I think I might have gotten cancer. And a little bit more on forgiveness. We have people to forgive every day, right? And so, one thing I really feel God talking to me about is saying it aloud. And I just say it aloud to myself because I really think my head and my heart needs to really hear when I talk about forgiveness, when I talk about forgiving somebody. So that's kind of my new addition to my daily practice is just a daily list of, okay, like who do I need to forgive today? And sometimes it's myself, and that's who I need to forgive. And that's a good place to start for all of us. Okay, lots of people joining. Hello. Um, yes, grudges equal disease, somebody said, and I could not agree with you more. So yes, grudges can really lead to that. All right. Any other questions as we are waiting for Keith? Okay, so let's see. A couple of the other things that I'm doing that I didn't do when I was younger is I'm eating more cruciferous vegetables. People used to call me in my younger days, I was the salad queen, and I was. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with salads, but I think there was probably a better way I could be eating vegetables. So my salads might have been just like a big, iceberg lettuce with maybe a couple of cherry tomatoes and a lot of dressing. Let's be clear, I loved dressing. So I really considered that just checking the nutritionist box that I have eaten my veggies that day. And you know what, bottom line, that's not really a super great choice. Lettuce is good. I'm not opposed to lettuce, but when we think about um, ORAC values, which ORAC is the highest level of antioxidants. And we think about broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower being up here, and iceberg lettuce is going to not be up so high. So it's really important to make sure that you are getting just the highest antioxidant and nutrient dense foods that you possibly can. And for me, in my cancer prevention to continue this journey, it's going to be cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all those things that I just mentioned. I'm also a big fan of bitter vegetables. It's really good for your gallbladder. Trust me on this. And it's just really good for your body in general. So that's going to be arugula and maybe things like Swiss chard. And I always, when it comes to the cruciferous veggies, including things like Swiss chard, I always cook them a little bit. And in fact, in the case of cabbage and broccoli, I cook them a significant amount. I want to be able to pierce it easily with a fork. And so it's really important for your gut. As far as preventing bloating and different things like that, you've really got to make sure that you're cooking it. It's going to be a lot easier to digest. So that is my advice on eating more green veggies, more cruciferous, and all those things are just really incredibly important. Okay, I think that I'm going to look through here more questions. Um, all right. So some of the other questions I've been getting lately online, what do I do to really maximize sleep? And I gave a speech probably 2 weeks ago for a CEO group. And the question I posed to them is how much are you sleeping each night? And I had a lot of hands raised that they said they slept less than 6.5 hours. So here's why that 6.5 hour point is so important is at 6.5 hours, that's where most of the research has been done when it comes to sleeping. So if you're not sleeping at least 6.5 hours a night, it sets you up for more inflammation. It sets you up to have more cravings the next day. And in fact, if you sleep less than 6.5 hours a night, studies show that you will end up craving about an extra 200 calories of carbohydrates for the rest of your day. So that is not a good thing. We got to be really careful of that. Okay, so we have Keith on the line here, and I'll just finish my quick conversation about sleeping, and then Keith will be joining us. And so here's the other thing about not sleeping enough is that when you're not sleeping enough, higher levels of inflammation, increased carb cravings, and it really sets you up to kind of be off of your routine for the rest of the day, which is really a dangerous thing because we want to make sure we are, eating our vegetables and drinking enough water and doing all those things, making really good decisions. And so I was telling my group that when you are not sleeping enough, again, it can really set your body up to not be making enough melatonin at night. And there's been some really interesting research that if you're not making enough melatonin, it actually is, you're at higher risk for breast cancer. And so some of the advice that I gave the group is to make sure your room is cool. Most of the research has been done on having your bedroom at 68 degrees or even less. Your body sleeps better when it's cold. Try to cut out a lot of liquids right before bed. I actually drink a fair amount of liquids during the day, but at night, about 2 hours before I go to bed, I pretty much cut out drinking like a whole glass of water or a cup of tea. I might just have some sips, because the last thing you want to be doing is waking up to go to the bathroom, because then it can be really challenging to get back to sleep. And then other things, screens. You've heard me talk about it a lot. I really am working hard on avoiding screens at least an hour before bed, if not 2 hours before bed. What happens when your eyeballs see that bright light? It says, "Oh my gosh, I've been making melatonin and serotonin to get Deb back to sleep, but instead I'm going to make cortisol and adrenaline because my body thinks it's daytime." So again, staying off of the screens at least an hour before bed, but many researchers are saying 2 hours before bed. Really important. Okay. And we are looking for Keith, and there he is.
There
Hi,
we go,
Keith.
finally. Sorry
How's it
about that.
going?
Doing great. I had an appointment, and phone call lasted longer than I
Oh,
expected.
don't worry. And there's a really good chance that I just messed this whole thing up because this is only my third IG Live.
Okay.
So happy Monday,
Oh, well,
everybody.
hi there.
Well, I was just kind of talking about some of your such practical advice. I mean, this is why I love your social media, because it's so practical. So I was just telling our listeners that I stopped drinking super hot tea, even though you can see it's starting to get wintry here in Washington. I'm doing better with my sleep and staying off of screens. And
hmm
Keith Bishop, you are so darn practical. Can you tell us why you're doing this work?
Well, a strong family history of cancer. So my personal family and my wife's family, high risks of cancer, like extremely high. And there's probably some genetic things going on, but it's lifestyle things that allows that to express. And so my research just keeps showing that. And that's what I'm trying to do in these posts, is just show that, okay, we need to make this change. We need to make this little change. And um, that each little change we make can help, and we don't have to be perfect.
Right,
So
right.
last week my wife was in the hospital last week. I didn't get to eat our normal food,
Yeah.
and it was very frustrating, and it was horrible. you know
It's a
but
shock, isn't it?
it is, and so my friend is like, finally I said, okay, we're not eating any more of this food in the hospital. I'm going to go get us bowls of this and bowls of that and things I can
Oh,
customize, and
right.
so get healthier options on
Yeah.
that. So, but it just, so there's just every little change that we can make has an impact on that. And
Yeah,
so trying to
sure.
decrease the risk for my wife and I for our cancer, and then sharing that information with others.
Yeah, that's good. And I love that you always publish research with
Mm-hmm.
every post that you
Right.
do. And I had a question last week. I was giving a speech at a CEO retreat, and one of the audience members says, "How do you know who to believe?" So I'm just going to
Right.
throw that to you because I so many people I follow and really respect. Eggs are incredible. You got to be having eggs,
Mm-hmm.
multiple times a week. And then I saw somebody who I also respect posting last night about, eggs can cause all these different types of problems, cholesterol aside. How do you know who to listen to?
Right. Well, very good question, on that. And oh, excuse me, let me get rid of that. So, and the matter of fact, um, yeah, actually, I read the medical journals, and
Yeah.
so I set up alerts so that whenever something's published on a particular topic, I get a notification, an email notification, and here's information about eggs, and yes, there might be a little issue with eggs. And I live in the country, and I used to have chickens. We moved about 4 years ago. I didn't take the chickens, and because
What?
I
Really?
was starting to see some research about that. So at that time, I was having eggs every single day. I was
Yeah.
having two eggs, at least two eggs every day, because it is the perfect food,
And it's
and yeah,
inexpensive. Yeah, great source of
inexpensive.
protein, right?
We had free range chickens, and had the dogs keeping the coyotes away, and I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
were doing everything, and but there's a little blip on that, and meaning that um, according to research, people that have more than four eggs a week, have a higher risk of getting cancer. And then
Wow.
there's another. There's not just one study. There's several
Mhm.
studies. Another study says that if you have less than three eggs a week, there's almost no risk of cancer. Now,
Really?
that risk doesn't mean that it's like there's still somebody's going to have a risk, and then other people aren't going to have any
Yeah.
risk. So we have to have that, kind of weigh that, and but to enough that I only eat maybe two eggs a week now.
Interesting.
So I like,
Interesting.
and I do like to be careful about the number of carbs. I
Right.
lean to, more of a plant based, and but trying to go more keto, type of thing, which is
Yeah.
hard with plant based, but so eggs can be part of that,
Mm-hmm.
and but it is one of those foods that just we need to be a little more careful about it until we learn more.
Until we learn
And
more.
so,
Yeah.
and yeah, so typically when I make a post, I actually use it not just one post. I mean, one reference. I put a medical reference journal,
Mm-hmm.
and that means that the researchers they've done the research. They published this. It's been reviewed by health professionals to make sure that they got everything right, everything
Mm-hmm.
from the statistics to how they did the study and everything like that. And occasionally some are rejected. And but anyway, but typically I put two or three articles
You
on each
do, yeah.
statement that I make, just because I want people to realize that it's just not one of those one-off type studies. I mean, there is one of those one-offs that are posted about recently that is just one study so far, two arms of the study, but
Mm-hmm.
but still it's enough to go, well, maybe we need to be careful about this
Right.
particular food.
Well, and I think that you're really bringing awareness, and
Hmm.
you provide information so that people can do their own due diligence.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important because, again, things like eggs, something we have been taught, cholesterol aside, again,
Right.
because there was such skewed research in the 70s on
Hmm.
cholesterol, 60s and 70s. But research, cholesterol aside, these are foods we've been eating forever. And to
Right.
find out that maybe it might be a culprit, or maybe it's, like you said, it might be a study that's a one-off.
Right.
And it's
Hmm.
really important to make sure that you just stay engaged in the research
Right.
to make sure
You know,
you're not doing some harm
Right,
to yourself.
exactly. And in these studies also, they didn't go into how the egg was fixed. So
Oh, that's interesting.
that may
Okay.
make a difference. And actually, I'm writing a blog, so everybody can come back to my blog. It's not ready yet.
Oh,
I haven't
good.
posted it, but I'm writing a blog about eggs,
Okay.
and part of that may be how it's cooked.
Really?
So a,
Oh, that's fascinating.
a scrambled egg is typically a higher temperature, which is always a problem with foods anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that oxidizes and damages the egg, and so it's possible that actually scrambled eggs may be worse of a problem than a egg that is like a sunny side up.
Right. Or maybe like a soft
Okay,
boiled egg or something
or
like that.
even exactly,
That's
and
so
soft-boiled eggs
interesting.
might even be healthier than a fried egg or a scrambled egg.
Mm-hmm.
So soft boiled or hard boiled eggs, So matter of fact, a hard boiled egg, that water only goes up to 212
What?
degrees,
Yeah,
something.
something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
222, 220, and so it only goes up to that temperature. And when we cook foods over 300, 350, that's when we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to see damage to the food.
Right.
So, so I'm not sure, once again, I'm gathering the information. I'm very careful. So every statement, even the
Mm-hmm.
blog I make, has a reference to that,
Oh, that's
because I want to provide the right information for everybody.
absolutely, absolutely. But you bring up a good point, Keith, that sometimes cooking temperature, if you think about, Cajun or, very browned meats and different things
Mm-hmm.
like that, where it's really like super crispy on the outside, those have been linked to cancer because it's an increase. Is
Yes.
it acrylamide?
Well, acrylamides is typically more of a carbohydrate. So that's
Carbohydrates. So
actually
like super crispy carbohydrates. So
exactly
that's going to be more of our French fries. Is that correct?
French fries,
Acrylamide.
the brown the brown crust on pizza. Okay.
Shoot, Keith,
so
no.
so how high a temperature is that pizza cooked at? 500 degrees.
Right, right.
We have a place here. It's a 5-minute pizza. Well, that oven, and I'm sure is at least
It's
500 degrees. But
at
so
least.
yeah,
Oh,
so
that's such
so
an interesting point. You're
yeah,
right. Yeah.
so have to be careful about those temperatures. And so it's going to be carbohydrates are acrylamides, but the meat is polycyclic amines and heterocyclic amines.
Right.
And so smoked, we call it
Right.
barbecue, but smoked meats, burnt
Mhm.
meats, blackened
Crispy,
meats, crispy,
blackened. Right.
those are
Beware of
definitely,
those words
yes,
because,
exactly. Those are concerns. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And so now you can pan fry like a blackened fish, is not, I'm not picking that.
Mm-hmm.
So I will eat some salmon and some other fish, but not blackened.
Right.
Now, sometimes they only blacken them with spices.
That's
So
true.
sometimes they're not truly seared and blackened,
That's
but even
true.
fish can be overcooked also.
It can.
Hmm.
It can. The crispy skin and all of that.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which is interesting because I think that, we're all working on lowering inflammation and,
Right.
anybody who's on this, listening to us today, they know our driver is cancer prevention.
Hmm.
So we're trying to eat better foods to lower our risk. But
Right.
who would have thought that the way we cook these things could also play a role in
Right.
cancer prevention?
Exactly. So, Oklahoma barbecues everything here.
Yeah.
And so, and so if we go there, I'm actually not eating the brisket. I'm not eating the ribs,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm trying to avoid those overcooked meats. And I'm typically going more like turkey or chicken,
Right.
if those are if I'm at that kind of a place.
Yeah.
And so, and at home also, when I grill a steak, I'm cooking at low temperature. I'm watching that temperature and trying to and not burning it, turning it often. And same thing with your pan grilling too.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. Hmm.
Yeah. Low and slow. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
same thing about frying foods too.
Mm.
So did you see the posts I made about frying food? So it's the
Right.
same thing.
Tell
And
us
so,
about it.
the oils, we have this temperature and everybody, oh, this oil's better than this oil and this oil and this oil. And I mean, there's this big debate going on. Well, the problem is, if everybody's trying to get an oil that won't smoke and that you can cook at 500
Right.
degrees. That's wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is too high of a temperature. It's going to damage the food
Yeah.
and create those, whether it be heterocyclic for carbs, or excuse me, acrylamides for carbs, or heterocyclic polyacyclic amines
And
for
proteins.
meats and proteins. That's too high of a temperature. And so we just got to rethink that. So just trying to find a high smoke point of an oil is not ideal. Not counting the deep fried. Go back to your French fries.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the worst meal is a hamburger, French fries, and a shake or a Coke. Okay.
Yeah.
And the fried meat, they cook it fast, they cook it hot, they deep fry those French fries, and then too many carbohydrates from the sweet tea or the whatever that
Or
beverage is going to
soda
be.
or
And
milkshake or whatever it is. Yeah.
exactly, that's probably one of the worst meals. And I think also a pepperoni and sausage pizza with a soda pop is going to be number two.
Yeah.
And so cooking those preserved meats at a high temperature, creates nitrosamines from the nitrates, those preservatives in the meats.
Right.
So once again, that's another thing I have about the pizza, type of a thing.
Yeah. All those preserved meats and
Mm-hmm.
heavily
Mm-hmm.
processed. Well, let's make our final question
Okay.
sugar.
Okay.
Dang it. I do love it.
Right.
Somebody asked earlier, why do I think I got cancer? And I'll also say, I grew up on sugar. I was a child of the 70s
Mm-hmm.
and I lived on Pop Tarts and those Poppin' Fresh orange cinnamon rolls where you popped them on the corner of your counter. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Right.
we ate a lot of sugar. We just
Mm-hmm.
did. My mom's from the South, and we just really enjoyed our
Do you like
sugar. And there was,
you like sweet tea?
you know, what is funny is we never really had sweet tea, but we had a
Really?
lot of Dr. Pepper.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Pepper was
Dr.
our
Pepper.
thing.
Wow.
Dr. Pepper and
Mm-hmm.
root beers and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, it's taken me a long time. It's probably taken me a good 10 or 15 years to really kill my sweet tooth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tell us about sugar and cancer. And do you have any tips on how to kill our sweet tooth?
Yes. So, yes. Well, cancer, there's people will say sugar feeds
Yeah.
cancer, but cancer actually has to have exactly the same nutrients that the rest of our body. It
Mm-hmm.
has to have minerals, it has to have fats, it has to have cholesterol, it has to have sugar, it has to have proteins. I can't remember if I'm getting all the food groups in there or not, but it has to have all the same nutrients. Although sugars seem to help to make it more readily available to grow, for
Right.
cancer cells to grow. And so now, so is it the sugars, or is it the way the foods are prepared, like fried foods or the cakes and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, and so too many sugars also creates belly or body fat, not just belly fat, but body
Absolutely.
fat.
Mm-hmm.
And body fat, especially belly fat or visceral adipose tissue, the fat that's in around the organs, pushing the belly out, that has inflammation chemicals. That is a driver for cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so sugars can be a concern. We do have to be careful about those. It's not the only thing. So if you go on a strict keto diet, you know, there's a couple of cancers that may benefit from that, but sometimes those cancer cells will adapt to burning ketones for energy.
Wow, really?
And
Hmm.
so we have to be careful. And I call it time to eating for cancer. I got a download e-report about that. But I like to do intermittent
Mm-hmm.
fasting. I got to keep throwing like kinks and different things at the cancer cells. So, eating a certain way, eating certain quantities, being careful about the sugars, and to help with that. Now, how to decrease the sweet tooth? Basically, my thought is going to be to try to wean off of it, but to maybe use the natural sweeteners, monk
Mm-hmm.
fruit and stevia, to help out. Those are not known to be a concern for cancer that I've found so
Okay.
far. And so that is going to be a way to do it. Actually, it was Dr. Pepper. I mean, I had a Dr. Pepper every single day, at least one. And
Really?
matter of fact, oh yeah. And have you ever been to the Waco Dr. Pepper
No,
Museum in Waco,
but I
Texas?
feel like I need to take my mom because my mom she just loved, she doesn't drink it now, but she would probably have 3 or 4 a
Yeah.
day of Dr.
I think it's
Peppers. For that.
Waco, Texas. Matter of fact, I used to have, oh well, memorabilia, Dr. Pepper or
Wow.
whatever.
Okay, so
And
I'll go see Chip and Joanna and go to
there
the
you
Dr.
go.
Pepper Museum.
Exactly.
Sounds like
Exactly.
a
So
great girls trip.
there you go. Oh, well, I'm glad I'm not going. So
I understand.
on that one. So yeah, my wife and daughter probably would, but granddaughter would go with
Oh
that.
my
So,
gosh.
but but actually for me, I just went cold turkey. Well, I take that back.
Really?
I did cut back, and I allowed myself to have one Dr. Pepper, kind of like on a Sunday night,
Mm-hmm.
and another one of those traditions that we had was popcorn Sunday night, and a Dr. Pepper, and I drink the Dr. Pepper. And then I remember I was teaching a class at church about that, and okay, here's how you can kind of wean off of it. And then finally, I thought, I really don't need that because
Yeah.
I'd already cut back, and
Right.
I'd gone to unsweet tea, and then even Sunday, it got to that Sunday night, I go, ooh, this is bad.
Really?
This is
Interesting.
it's too sweet. I
Huh?
can taste chemicals and things in it, and got to the point in that, like, now it's like, any, like a Dr. Pepper, any kind of a sweetened beverage like that, or even sweet tea, I
Mhm.
can't stand it. It's
Wow. Interesting.
at all.
So
I
it's
mean, just
completely
at all.
changed your taste buds, basically. It's
Correct,
completely
exactly.
changed your taste
So
buds.
I did wean myself off,
Hmm.
and but you got to substitute with something
You
else. So
do.
if you're drinking it for the
Right.
energy or the caffeine, then excuse me, then maybe we need to go with some tea,
Hmm.
some hot
Yep.
tea or cold tea,
Yep.
with a little caffeine. And if you're putting in a couple packets of sugar, make a switch to stevia and
Hmm.
monk fruit, and then even you cut back on those quantities, because you
Right.
really do, you want to get rid of that sweet tooth,
Right.
because if you have that
You're
sweet tooth,
retraining yourself, basically,
you're
too.
you're
Right.
you're going to always kind of gravitate toward
Mhm.
the sweet beverages and the desserts and various different
Yeah.
things. So you really do want to try to wean, and probably wean yourself off is probably easier, but cold turkey can definitely be done.
It
But
can.
you got to get the
Yeah,
you,
it can. And
you
I
got to
remember I
get the
was
caffeine.
right. Yeah, I did cold turkey. It didn't last, unfortunately, but I did cold turkey about 20 years ago. And I remember having ketchup for the first time, like 2 months
Hmm.
later, and thinking, oh, shoot, I guess my ketchup has gone bad.
Yeah.
But it's because
Okay.
ketchup is a third sugar.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
right.
Yeah. So what did you do to decrease your, sodas and teas and
Yeah.
things?
Yeah, well, I think probably the best tip I can give everyone is I really drink a lot of hot tea. I mean, I
Hmm.
know not too hot now. I've learned that from you, and you have great research to back it up. But what I did is I just always had a hot beverage in my hand, and
Hmm.
and I had read some research just a million years ago about how hot liquids can kill your appetite for so many things.
Okay.
And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to try this because again, I was, handfuls. I would just keep a bag of Nestle chocolate chips in my pantry, and every time I'd walk by, I'd grab a handful and think, well, it's better than eating a whole cookie. No, no. It's really not. I'm
Right.
trying to convince myself it's really not. So
Right.
I just always had hot tea with me. And
Hmm.
that really, I got to tell you, that really did the trick. And I just retrained myself. It took me probably a month, but I got to the point where I just thought, the tea is enough, and I will
Right.
do a little alternative sweetener like the monk fruit or stevia
Hmm.
or some sort of a combination of the two,
Right.
which is readily available everywhere from Costco to
Oh,
Walmart to Safeway or Kroger stores. So, be
exactly.
on the lookout for things like that, and I'll
Hmm.
post more
Yeah.
information.
So I do. Yeah, I do use like a matcha, or coffee, either one,
Yeah,
unsweetened. Kind of my mid morning, whenever my blood glucose has dropped down, since I do intermittent
yeah,
fasting, my glucose has dropped, and oh man, 10 o'clock, I'm getting hungry, and so that's when I do drink something, and that feeling goes away within minutes. So it really
yeah.
helps.
Okay, that's good.
Hmm.
That's good. Well, Keith, thank you for our first IG Live. Let's make sure it's not our last because the
Sure.
next time we talk, I want to talk about your podcast. Actually, why don't you tell us about your podcast?
Well, yes. So, Jeff Lopes and Jeff Lopes is a a colorectal cancer survivor. And so he did have some surgery to remove that, but he refused to do other treatments. And so he's going a natural route. And so he and I, hooked up, and he's got a podcast. He's based in Canada, and is very well known. He's a boxing sportswear type person, but kind of like athletes is how he first started, and then he's actually a business coach, and so he's kind of evolving a little bit. And so now we're doing more and more. So he's actually doing the podcast, and I'm joining him for that. We're going to do another recording this Friday, which means it'll be probably the next week when another one comes out. And we're going to be talking about nuts.
Ooh, good.
Yes, and so nuts are very important. There's a lot of controversies about nuts, like any food. There is a lot of things we've been told. What is the truth, but it's a learning process, and so we have to weigh even what we knew 30 years ago that was scientific at that time. But what are we learning now?
Right.
And so we do that podcast, about every 3-4 weeks or so, and not on a regular, nothing like what you do, and so, which is great. And so actually, I've got my scrubs on today, so I'm in the office, and I work full time, and so I don't have time to do a lot of things. And so, but Jeff, he's got a crew already. He says, Keith, he said, I want to get more information out. And so we're going to kind of cover like one topic at a time.
And just take a deep dive probably on
deep dive into it. So matter of fact, he said, Keith, are you going to have your references? I said, yes, I will.
You are. I will tell you, and I'll just end on this, like a hallelujah to you. Honestly, you take such a deep dive. You make it easy to understand, and you post research. This is really important, because to go back to that original question, how do you know who to believe?
Right.
So, I want somebody to present the information to me, post the research, and then let me make my own decision. And that's
exactly.
That's what you do. So I thank you for that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keith, thank you so much. Good luck
Deborah.
to your wife with her, was it a knee replacement?
Yes. Well, a revision of the knee replacement. Oh. So it was pretty tough, but she's remarkable. I mean, it's really neat to see her every day, significant improvements. So it's going great. So yes.
All right. Well, I'll be praying for her.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Okay.
Great to
thank
see
you.
you. Okay. Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.